Today's devotion is from Acts chapter 23, verses 12 through 22. This is titled A Plot to Kill Paul. Let me read verses 12 through 15. When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now therefore you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you are going to determine his case more exactly, and we are ready to kill him before he comes near." Whoa. So if they don't succeed, they die, right? How can they square this with Mosaic law? This is premeditated murder. Are there any laws of truth and justice that hatred and bigotry will not break? They have essentially wished for God to damn them and the devil to take them if they do not succeed. And they have no doubt that the chief priests and elders will go along with this. They must have a pretty low opinion of them. And the priests and elders, what do? They go along with it. Why? Because this was against Paul, who they hated. So they allow themselves to be led by a band of assassins. Great. Okay, so this is a result of false religious zeal. And this is also the result of an unrenewed heart. And this behavior has been going on down through the ages, and we see it even today. But, verse 16, now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush, so he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Well, Paul has a nephew. We didn't know that earlier, did we? He obviously loves Paul. He doesn't hate him. But we have no other information about Paul's nephew. We don't know whether the nephew was already a Christian or still a Jew, nor do we know the means by which he discovered the plot. Commentators throughout the years have come up with different theories, but we have no proof of any of them. But we do know that God has many ways of bringing to light the deeds of darkness and exposing them. Here he uses God uses Paul's nephew as a guardian angel. Do you think that's strange? Well, let's look at some other places in Scripture. He is Lord of the angels, and he can command an earthquake. He did this during Peter's imprisonment by Herod, and this is described in Acts chapter 12. And Paul and Silas's imprisonment in Acts chapter 16. This time, he employs Paul's nephew to execute his purpose. Now, Paul received Christ's promise of protection just the night before. We got that in Acts chapter 23, verse 11. Let me read that to refresh us. The following night, the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." So he had that going for him. But he did not neglect to use ordinary means to protect themselves. Look at verses 17 and 18. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, "Paul the prisoner called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you." Now, Paul's behavior as a prisoner must have been pretty good, that he could call a centurion over and ask him to do a favor, and the centurion did it. And on top of that, this centurion's act helped save Paul's life. Now what happens next? Verses 19 to 22. The tribune took him, Paul's nephew, by the hand, and going aside asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And Paul's nephew said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more closely about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things." This tribune is receptive. Notice the extent that he has gone to make himself accessible. He takes this young man by the hand to encourage him to speak freely, and then also that he will be listened to. He leads him to a private place where there are no witnesses, and then he charges him to be quiet about it, tell no one about their meeting. Okay, We've covered the verses for today's devotion, but the story does not end here. But we can have some takeaways. So what are those? Well, let's take a look. First, leaders, anyone in any position of power, anyone who thinks they're pretty great, probably should not think of themselves as great. They should make themselves accessible, even to the most minute or lowest person on the totem pole. No one should think that they will be made smaller by showing humility and charity to someone else. Another point we have here is that God gave Paul additional signs by using these Roman soldiers that they would have time and an inclination to listen to both Paul and the nephew kindly. That would not have been their normal demeanor. So, I got a joke to kind of sum all this up, and some of you may have heard this before. It's about signs. There's a flood coming. The police cruise the neighborhood and say, everybody needs to evacuate. One man says, nope, I trust God will save me. The waters start to rise. Some of the neighbors have a boat. They come by and say, hop on in, the waters are rising. He says, nope, I trust God's going to save me. Waters start rising. He climbs out of the window and up on the roof. After a while, a helicopter comes by. They drop a hoist sling and they say, sling up, the water's rising fast. He goes, nope, I trust God's going to save me. The water continues to rise. Man drowns. Now he gets to heaven and he asks God, God, why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent the police. I sent a boat. I sent a helicopter. What more did you expect? May we be open to the movement of God's hand. May we be willing to do His will. And I hope this has been encouraging to you. Good day.